Hey everybody, it's Iz here, and today we're looking at the biggest problems with Ashes of Creation. These are comments I've seen online, and so we're going to take a look and see if there's any truth to this stuff and if we should be worried. These are problems people think could be just devastating to this game, that could ruin it or potentially make it not come out at all. And remember, we're not trying to be a fanboy of Ashes of Creation. Some of these may be valid, and what we want to do is look at them objectively, see if there's any truth to these concerns, and on the other hand, what maybe offsets that, and if it's something we need to watch moving forward. Now, first up is the asset store, and this is something I first saw on MMORPG.com, talking about how they're using the MMO starter kit. This was like with health bars and the inventory, 5x5 inventory grid, and this is like a pack you can buy for the Unreal Engine that kind of gives you these widgets, like this introductory stuff that looks very similar, probably identical to what Ashes of Creation have been using. This is like $100, right? And we're talking about a project that supposedly has $30 million behind it. Why are they using this $100 pack? There was also the procedural landscape ecosystem. This is a video someone showed me that shows a landscape and environment that's very similar to what we have in Ashes of Creation. I'll show you a side-by-side there, and you look at the flowers and it looks almost exactly the same, and I think that's $150, right? And so people say this is unoriginal and lazy, and they don't have enough developers to even make this stuff, and a concern that there's no cohesion, right? When you have a group of developers who are making stuff, it should all fit together, but when you're buying all these little pieces, that's not going to fit together. So those are some valid concerns. What we can actually see in game is probably happening, but I would definitely think the counterpoint to that is how much of this stuff is placeholder, right? How much of it is that inventory system? I doubt they spend $100 on an inventory and that's it, right? They need something to get going, right? Because their goal right now isn't to make a great UI and a great inventory system. Right now in testing, what they're wanting to do is get in and see how their systems, which are unique to their game, actually work. So they want to get in game and get rolling as quickly as possible. So instead of spending, days and days or a week on end making this stuff that isn't going to be final anyway, why don't we just buy this little pack? We can get in game, have a rudimentary inventory system, and then test the systems we actually want to test, like the node system. And that helps speed up development, right? You're able to move quicker and use this temporary stuff which you're going to replace later on down the line. Now, if they never did replace it, that's something we could look at and be like, what the heck is up with this? But there's really no reason to believe they wouldn't replace that stuff. And it's pretty common practice you'll see in other games. I mean, there's been big drama from other, indie games that don't replace this stuff. They even have watermarks and it looks ridiculous. But pretty much every MMO I've played, you'll see placeholder stuff. You'll see gray box stuff. You'll see copy paste stuff where it's like the same barrel they use 100 times, just because that's not what they're concerned about right now. So yes, this is something we're seeing. How much of it's going to carry over to the final game? And the real concern should be at the end product. Do we feel like we're playing a game we've played before because it's using assets we've seen before? Or does it feel new and different and fresh and all work together? And that's why they have artists, and that's why they have lead developers who can make sure that stuff, because they can take these assets and still change them and mold them, right? They can adjust things and change colors and palettes and all this stuff to fit within their game. And so I'm curious to know what you guys think about that whole asset store. Is it good? Is it bad? What do you think? Let me know down below. Next up, we're talking about the player referral system. And this is where if you use someone's referral link, all the money you spend in game, buying packages or a monthly sub, they get a percentage of that money back to them. And everybody's saying, see, obviously this is a pyramid scheme, right? Can't you see this is a terrible pyramid scheme and just recruiting people? And it definitely led to a lot of spam, especially around the Kickstarter, people spamming their referral links. And then also, I mean, you gotta wonder, like, what about dishonest reviews, right? Are they saying like they actually like this game, or are they just putting it out there because they want you to click on their referral link so they can make money? Hashtag sellout, click on my referral link right down below. No, I'm just kidding. But there's a little confusion as far as how this system works. First of all, it's not a pyramid in the sense that you get money from everybody below you. It's only the first level, right? So if I'm here and people use my link, I get back from whatever they use, but whoever they recruit, it only goes to them, right? So you only get like one layer deep. So it's not really a pyramid. It's more like a pancake scheme, I guess. I don't know. I've only got like 2 or 3 referrals, I think. Thank you who's used my referral, but I'm not trying to steal your money. So if you're trying to, if you're concerned about dishonest reviews, really, you got to just trust the reviewer, right? You got to trust the YouTuber or the Twitch person who you're using. And the videos you're watching, do you trust that person or not? And you kind of got to judge for yourself. And this stuff already happens. If you go to any of the gaming websites out there and you're reading an article about, whatever, Blade and Soul, on the corner there's an ad for Blade and Soul, right? Why do you think that's there? Because if you click on it, then the website gets money for that, right? So this stuff already happens on the business level, and they just took it and gave it to players. And it doesn't affect gameplay at all, right? Even if I had 1,000 people below me and I was making millions of dollars, it wouldn't change the game at all. It doesn't change gameplay. It doesn't change, it doesn't change the power in game and your abilities. It doesn't do any of that. So really all this is doing is giving the player an incentive for getting more players, which is a good thing. That one, they're giving money back to players, right? I mean, they're giving you money. That's awesome. And 2, it's bringing more people into the game. Yes, sometimes there is a little bit of referral spam. It's not so bad anymore. And whether or not you trust the reviewer, well, that's up to you. Now, talking about money, we're looking at the payment model for Ashes of Creation, which is a subscription base. There's no box price. You don't pay anything to play the game. As far as like a $60 fee for a box price, right? You just have the monthly sub. World of Warcraft, you have the box price and the expansions, plus you have the monthly sub. And some games like Guild Wars 2 is just the box price. And this is something I haven't seen in any other game where there's no box price at all. You don't pay that big initial part. It's just the monthly fee each month. And obviously some people just don't want to pay, right? They don't want to pay a monthly fee, $15 every month. They don't like that at all, right? And they also say there's free alternatives out there. There's other games out there that I could play that are free. Why would I want to pay for a game? And the concern is that if you cut those people out, right, there's less players because you're missing out on all these other people who would have played the game if it was buy to play or free to play. But my opinion is, first of all, not having a box price is great, right? It's $60 that you're not paying initially. Now, if you're paying each month, you're going to make that up pretty quickly. Like in the first 4 months, you're going to be paying for that box price. But some games do both, right? World of Warcraft, you pay the box price and you pay the monthly price. So no box price is nice. And remember, some games that are free isn't always free, right? There's a lot of games where sure you can start playing, but you kind of have to spend money to be competitive, right? Even on the little thing like inventory system and things like that. And then there's the big, huge, horrible, egregious free-to-play games where it's like, there's real money transaction where I buy the sword and it makes me do 1,000,000 damage. And obviously I'm going to kill everybody because I spent money, and there's some games that even do both. They have a monthly sub and there's real money transactions that make you more powerful, right? Which is like the worst possible system. So they want to do this because they want quality content. They don't want to have real money. They're not at all. There's nothing that is going to be pay to win whatsoever, right? They have been absolutely emphatic on that point. There is not anything you can spend a single penny on that will make you more powerful or give you an advantage in game. It's only cosmetic stuff, right? I got this funny little wizard hat or whatever it is, you know what I mean? And that to me is another great thing because it's quality content. That $15 a month is going to continue going to quality content and hopefully have quality players, right? Free to play games got tons of gold sellers and 5-year-old goofballs that are yelling about peeing their pants, like whatever it is, right? You got to get these really terrible, people who play these free to play games because the barrier for entry is so low. Having a $15 monthly fee, I know it sucks for some people who can't pay that, but the rest of us, I feel like it really does give you a much, much better experience. Now, next up is a really interesting one. I really want to know what you guys think down below. And that's talking about the PvP in this game. If you don't know, there is open world PvP. You can just attack people whenever you want. And people are saying this is a big problem, ganker's paradise, right? I mean, you see some games where people just get murdered all the time. The newbie starting area, they're just getting destroyed. And They say that for MMOs, the most popular aspect of MMOs is PvE. You look at World of Warcraft, right? Has PvP in it, but the most by far is questing and dungeons and raids, right? And so EverQuest, the original, EverQuest is so much PvE focused. And they're concerned this brings about toxic communities. You look at PvPers, they're more hardcore, they're talking smack all the time, they're not as nice, maybe not as many role players, right? And so these really toxic communities they're concerned about for this kind of game that has PvP as such a central focal point in the game. Now, remember, there are some counter systems to this though, right? There's corruption, and the way that works is if you attack somebody and they don't attack you back, maybe they're trying to run away or whatever, or maybe you just one-shot them, I don't know, because they're such a low level, but if they don't fight back, then you get corruption. And the more corruption you have, the more that you're just killing people. When you die, you lose experience and you can even lose your items, right? And so that counters to that. There's also a bounty system where, hey, this one guy's killing people all the time, let's put a bounty on him. Then they can easily find you. Maybe on the mini map, they can see you, and when they kill you, they get a bounty, right? And so there's some counter systems to that. We'll have to see how it actually plays out, right? Everything sounds good on paper. Whether or not it actually works, we'll have to wait and see. And don't forget, this game does also have massive PvE as well. PvP isn't the only thing, but it has massive PvE. There's gonna be 40-man raids, right? There's dungeons, there's quests, there's tons of stuff. So it's not only PvP, and PvP is hugely popular, right? What are the most popular games out right now? You got League of Legends, Overwatch, and all these games that are PvP games. And so saying that it's not popular just because there hasn't been an only PvP MMO out there, most of the successful MMOs have had both. And really, as far as the community and how it plays out, if it's gankers, is going to come down to each game and their developers, right? The community and the developers itself. Because you look at some games like League of Legends and Overwatch, these have some very toxic people in them, you know what I mean? But there's other games that are PvP focused. Look at Dark Age of Camelot, one of the best communities you could ever have in a game, 15, 20 years later, and that game is still heralded as one of the best PvP games ever. And it was amazing because that was a great game with great developers who focused on that. Next up, we're talking about one of the most controversial topics, I think, which is the combo bar system. If you don't remember from like the PAX demo, while you're attacking, there's this little bar at the bottom of the screen, and you need to activate your ability when it got to like the little sweet spot. And a lot of people say they don't like that, it's distracting and ugly. And then not just the combo bar system, but also the animations, and it's a clunky, floaty combat that they didn't really like. And they had this like staff that looked like you were swinging a big baseball bat and stuff. And then everything we've seen so far has been like tab targeting, right? Just old school tab target, attack that target. And so people are not really impressed with the combat we've seen so far in Ashes of Creation. Now you see my first counterpoint, which says get good, but don't get mad. I'm not talking about you per se. I'm talking about the combo bar itself needs to get good, right? The combo bar, the interface to it needs to get better. It needs to get good, and that's what they're actually actively doing now. If you look at the most recent videos that are out there, it's not there. Not because they've gotten rid of it, but because they're working on it to make it better, to make it more intuitive, to make it more seamless and fit in with the world and stuff like that. So it's gonna get good. Now, I would also say you need to get good too, for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of people who complain about this never actually got to play the game. Even if you did play it, let's say at PAX, you've played it for such a short amount of time. Did you really get used to that system, right? Because it's probably where you're gonna be able to get used to the timing, and you're gonna see it out of the corner of your eye. You don't have to stare at it the entire time, right? Just like your hotbar, you don't stare at your hotbar all day, right? And no, you remember and you build, muscle memory, and you get used to it. And remember, these are very early iterations, right? Everything changes massively. Look at Crowfall, another Kickstarter game that we've gotten to see in development from the beginning. And it had a massively, hugely different combat system in the beginning, and then they changed it, and then they were gonna do with this sort of rooted combat, and now it's swung and completely different again. Normally, we don't see games this early in development to see these changes. So things will change. Obviously, we got a long time before it comes out. it will change a lot. And don't forget, this is going to be a hybrid system where they've talked about it can have tab target, but instead of having a fireball that's tab target, instead of specking for that, maybe you spec for this meteor, or maybe you spec for this flame blast, which isn't tab target, but some sort of action combat, hybrid system. Stephen Shreve mentioned that in the PAX Q&A. He also mentioned it again in some more recent live stream dev Q&As. I don't know how actiony of a combat system, you think of action combat and it's like Blade and Soul or Black Desert Online, or these different games that are very like rooted, where you don't, your character moves for you, and it's, so there's different kind of ideas of action combat. You also have like Guild Wars 2, which was kind of a hybrid system. Then there was WildStar, which was totally freeform with like cones and stuff, which is kind of action combat. But there will be more options instead of just tab target that we've seen so far. Now, for me, this is the biggest concern that I have. And to be fair, this is a concern I have for every single MMO. So it's not just for Ashes of Creation, but that's the engine itself. And if it can sustain having massive battles, siege castles with hundreds of players, and people have said this is an unproven engine, right? We haven't seen massive MMOs have giant siege battles with the Unreal Engine, right? It's not something that we've seen before. And typically other games make their own engines, right? You look at Camelot Unchained is a Kickstarter game, been in development for 5 years, but they are making their own engine specifically because they want to be able to have hundreds and possibly like up to 1,000 people in these massive battles. And so you don't typically see like the Unreal Engine or Unity, these engines that are like, pre-built. They always make their own. But I did a quick search on Google. It's google.com. And I did a Google search for Unreal Engine massive PvP. And there actually have been some MMOs that have done it. You got Terra, you got Bless, you got Blade and Soul, were just some I saw in the first few minutes YouTube videos that show some massive battles. Now, everybody's definition of massive is different. I would say if there's 100 people in the battle, then that's pretty massive. Would I want more, like 500? Sure, that would be awesome. But if you can have 100 people, then that's pretty good. And you can see videos here showing that sort of stuff that's available. Now, is it great? I'd say Terra and Bless and Blade and Soul, and someone's like, oh, I played it and it was terrible and those suck. Well, tell me one game that has had great, massive PvP battles in an MMO, right? We have these rose-colored glasses thinking about old games we played, right? Like maybe Dark Age of Camelot, Warhammer, Elder Scrolls Online, Guild Wars 2. All of those games had massive PvP, and all of them, without a doubt, had problems, right? We talk about Dark Age of Camelot, one of the most heralded PvP games, right? They made RVR basically, hundreds of players, and there was, you would actually call it, it was lag radar, right? Lagdar, where you'd be fighting and all of a sudden you would start lagging really bad and you would have FPS issues, and then you would know, oh, there's probably 50 people coming over this hill, right? Depending on how bad the lag was also depending on how many people. Oh my gosh, my computer almost shut down. There's probably 100 people coming up behind us, right? Warhammer Online had huge issues, right? ESO, huge issues. They had to lower the cap over and over and over again. Terrible performance. Guild Wars 2 was so bad they had culling, where there would be 200 people on screen, but you only saw 50 of them because the other ones they couldn't show you because the server couldn't handle it. You know what I mean? So there are definitely a lot of games that we've played that weren't actually really that great. Now, one of them I will say, and I saw someone else post this and I was like, oh yeah, that was pretty good, was PlanetSide 2. And PlanetSide 2 is something that's pretty interesting because the lead developer, the engineering guy in Ashes of Creation is Jason Crawford. And guess what he worked on? PlanetSide 2, right? And also some other games like EverQuest 2 and EverQuest Next. He did the engine, and that's what he's done for like the past decade, is work on MMO infrastructure, net code for massive battles, right? And so I put in Jason Crawford we trust, because really it's going to depend on what they do to the back end, which they've said they've been working on that this whole time, and that's their goal, is to have big battles. And one other thing I just put in there I want to talk about real quick is the 5% royalties. We talk about why games make their own engines, and maybe Unreal just is really bad and maybe it won't work. But maybe part of the reason why other games don't use it isn't because Unreal couldn't work, but just the fact that you have 5% royalties. So when you use their engine, all the money you make in your game, 5% goes back to them. So instead of doing that, they make their own engine. But if they didn't have that 5% royalty, I wonder how many games would we have seen? And maybe we would have seen some pretty awesome ones too. And last but not least, we got to talk about the potential problem of this just being another generic MMO. When you talk about Ashes of Creation or someone watches a video, you got to wonder what sticks out to them and what is that wow factor, right? There's no flashy animations or combat. There's no giant dragons breathing fire and stuff. And it doesn't look like anything is particularly special or different than any other MMO. And a lot of people are burned out on MMOs. They play thousands and thousands of hours in questing and dungeons and other games, and a lot of them have just been WoW clones, right? The same sort of thing you're doing over and over and over again. And in this, what we have seen so far has not been flashy, but sometimes flashy can be bad. Sometimes that can have negative effects on your performance and lag and your FPS and stuff like that. And so flashy isn't always a good thing. And remember, right now they are testing the systems. They're wanting to make sure that when you're questing and your experience helps that node level up. And when that node levels up, it represents the race that contributed the most experience to it, right? So they're doing a lot of system tests right now. And these are systems that I think will be very meaningful, where other games have had meaningless, repetitive content, right? You go make a human in World of Warcraft, and guess what? You're in the same place you have been for the past 12 years, standing in front of a church, and there's a bunch of wolves you gotta kill, and there's some gnolls, and then, right, it's the same thing that it's always been, and they try to mix it up a little bit, but when you have this repetitive content that is always the same, it's no wonder people are tired of doing it after thousands of hours. And that's the thing that I think separates Ashes of Creation more than anything. It's not going to be, seafaring combat, which sounds awesome. It's not going to be dragons you can fly on if you're, the king of a castle. It's not, caravans that are PvP zones and actually affect the economy, right? Those are awesome things, but we've kind of seen those in other games. What's really going to set Ashes of Creation apart, which I think will help break it away from this MMO burnout and set it apart, is the fact that what you do has an effect in game. If you go to a different server and you make a new character, each server's different. There's different nodes and different quests and different dungeons and different storylines that have unlocked that you won't see on any other server, right? And as you're playing, the world will change around you, and you can have an effect on the game itself. You want to level up your node to a metropolis. You want to tear down that other one. All these sorts of things will have an effect and make the game meaningful that I think we haven't seen in other games, which is why we're burnt out and tired of those. And it's hard to communicate that in game, in videos, while they're still building it. So a lot of stuff I think that actually makes this game less generic and more special than you might realize. Now, as you can see, there are a lot of potentially big problems with Ashes of Creation, and I've kind of given my opinion and some of the counterpoints to these concerns, but I really want to know what you guys think. Remember, it's important not to get blinded. Don't be a fanboy. It's okay to be excited, and I always try to look on the bright side, right? Look on the positive side. Look, potentially it could work, right? Nobody will know. Not even the developers will know for sure if something works or doesn't work until the game comes out. And probably not even until 5 or 6 months after it's been released. But these are things that we can look at, we can give feedback on, we can watch moving forward. To see my most recent video, click there on the left. Another one you might like is on the right. To subscribe, click that button in the middle. And thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.